You are listening to the Nightline Sports Network, brought to you by Travis Dever and the Dever team, 386-690-1636.
Welcome to the AAC Report, only on the Nightline Sports Network. I'm Jeff Allen. Thanks so much for listening. Coming up, our team-by-team previews for college football 2021 continues. We will talk to Rich Phillips, the voice of SMU, and Joe Miller, the Navy Radio Network. They are standing by in the virtual green room and will join us just a few moments. Some other news around the conference to pass along to you. Defending AAC women's soccer champion South Florida has been tabbed the 2021 favorite as voted by the league's head coaches. They got 6 first-place votes for 62 overall points. Memphis was ranked second with 3 first-place votes and 59 points. 3 through 9 are SMU, Cincinnati, UCF, East Carolina, Houston, Temple, and Tulsa. And in volleyball, UCF, the 3-time defending conference champion, they were named the unanimous favorite for the 2021 AAC Volleyball Preseason Coaches Poll that was released on Wednesday. The Knights got 10 first-place votes. Houston got 1 first place to be ranked second. 3 through 10 are SMU, Tulane, Cincinnati, Temple, South Florida, Wichita State, Tulsa, and East Carolina in that order. And former University of Cincinnati cross-country track and field student-athlete Hannah Markell and former SMU track and field student-athlete Ashton Woods have been named the AAC honorees for the 2021 NCAA Woman of the Year Award. Established in 1991, the NCAA Woman of the Year Award is rooted in Title IX, recognizes graduating female college athletes who have exhausted their NCAA eligibility and distinguished themselves in academics, athletics, service, and leadership throughout their collegiate careers. All right, coming up next, team-by-team preview of the Midshipmen from Navy. Joe Miller of the Navy Radio Network joins us next when the AAC Report continues.
Hey, this is Travis Dever, Kai's Real Estate, the Dever team, New Smyrna Beach. Your source for real estate and everything else, New Smyrna Beach. Proud sponsor of Nightline. Call me anytime at 386-690-1636. That's 386-690-1636. Let me show you my hometown, New Smyrna Beach, UCF's favorite beach. Go Knights and charge on.
An auto accident can change your life forever. At Chad Barr Law, we are raising the bar on what to expect from your personal injury attorney. Hi, I'm Chad Barr, and I want you to know that our entire team is dedicated to providing you with the representation you deserve in your greatest time of need. If you or a loved one have been injured in an auto accident, call 407-599-9036 for a free consultation or visit chadbarlaw.com. At Chad Barr Law, our clients come to us in need and leave as family. Offices, Altamont Springs.
Looking for more out of your Porsche? Look no further than Flat6Motorsports.com. They have the widest selection of aftermarket Porsche parts anywhere in the world. With over 85 product lines and in-depth expertise, Flat6Motorsports.com is your one-stop shop for any Porsche performance needs. Whether you're shopping for intakes, exhausts, suspension, or tuning, they have you covered. Flat6Motorsports.com is the premier Porsche aftermarket specialist. Check them out at Flat6Motorsports.com.
And as we continue our team-by-team previews, it's time now to look at the Midshipmen of Navy. And once again, joining us, our pleasure to welcome Joe Miller of the Navy Radio Network. Joe, as always, a pleasure to have you on the show.
Great to be here, Jeff.
Awesome. And first, let's take a quick look at last year after a tremendous 2019-2020. Certainly was disappointing. COVID certainly had its impacts, especially right out of the gate with BYU. A 3-7 overall record, 3-4 in the conference. Just as you look back at last year, what is your assessment of the season?
It was obviously, like everybody experienced, a pretty crazy year. And I go back to sort of that opening game against BYU, and a lot of us around the program knew that they hadn't been practicing, and sort of the talk coming into that game, what's this going to look like? And then it kind of looked like what a lot of us suspected it might look like in that first game. And look, they took, I think they're kind of tired of talking about it. They took some extra precautions early last year because they were trying to figure out what was the best thing to do as a football team, as the academy was concerned as well. It's not only, as a football team, but they were getting obviously they had to do what was right for being at the Naval Academy as well. So I think you look back on the season and kind of just the stops and starts, the canceled games, the shifting of the schedule. There was a couple of high points, certainly, a win against Tulane where they came back down 24-0. They beat Temple at home. They got some momentum going. They beat East Carolina on the road. It looked like they were starting to turn the corner, and then it really was a situation where, they ran into some good teams, and the biggest sort of surprise was they struggled to run the football. I mean, it's really hasn't happened in 20 years there. They couldn't run the football. And in a team that's going to run the football, 85% of the time, 90% of the time, if you're not going to be able to run the football and run your stuff, it's going to be a difficult season, and it really was unlike any season that I've been around for this team. They only averaged about 3.7 yards per attempt running the football. The year before, it was over 6 yards per attempt. They only averaged 16 points per game. So, and of course, a lot of that had to do with the quarterback position. They just didn't find a guy. Got a little bit better at the end of the season, but for the most part, it was an offense that just could not score, and while the defense improved as the season goes along, you're not going to win too many games in this conference with a defensive first mentality and an offense that can only put up 16, 17 points a game.
Yeah, and of course there was no playbook for the COVID situation either, so that certainly was a challenge in among itself. I mean, besides the quarterback play, is there anything else you can attribute to the decline in the running game last year?
Well, I think one of the issues coming in was, getting prepared for the season. I mean, we were at the preseason press conference, a couple weeks ago, and I'm with Coach Niamatalolo. You can only say that too many times before people kind of look at you and say, well, is that an excuse? And the fact is they didn't block for the first month. There wasn't a lot of contact going on. They didn't get the offensive line the reps that they wanted to do. And look, they will readily admit that a couple times they kind of went away from some of the stuff that they do best to see if they could be more of a throwing team. They went into an offense in the game against SMU down in Dallas where they tried to throw the football 30 to 35 times because they thought that would give them the best chance to win. So they got a little bit away from where they were in the years past. But I would, Coach said this the other day, I hate, because it sounds like I'm making an excuse, but we just didn't practice for a couple months, and it's hard to get that continuity. This offense, I know it sounds like a cliche a lot of times when people talk about it if you turn on a Navy game, but it is about getting the right amount of reps. It's about precision. It's about practice, and it's about that little 0.5% that they have to be better than everybody else because, they don't have the athletes, they don't have the size, they don't have the physical advantage that they have against other teams, and that was completely taken away last year. So I know it sounds a little bit like an excuse, and I know it sounds like a little bit of a cliche, but that's what they were facing. That was the uphill climb that they were trying to get the reps and the precision while also kind of doing it through walkthroughs, and it just didn't work out well.
As far as the quarterback position goes, who's the lead guy to take the reins this year?
I was talking to Coach. He said, "Look, we have 3 guys right now. We'd like to make a decision, probably within. That was probably a week ago. So they'd like to make a decision sooner than later. You have 3 guys: Xavier Arline, who played and started some games last year. He started the game against Tulane early in the season and was pulled in that game. Of course, started the Army-Navy game and had their best rushing production of the season. A highly recruited guy. He came to the academy as a big lacrosse recruit. Was recruited by the likes of North Carolina. Initially was going to go to North Carolina before Mac Brown got there because he was going to be allowed to play football and lacrosse. Then decided to come to the Naval Academy. So he's in a battle there with Ty Lavatai, a 6'2" sophomore, big kid. Bigger than what we've normally seen over the last few years as a Navy quarterback, and Masai Maynor, who is another guy that we saw a little bit last year. And, right now, Honestly, I don't think there's a leader in the clubhouse. I would expect them to probably make a decision, but I would also expect these guys to play. Look, as it's turned out over the last 3 or 4 years, it's been almost impossible to get through a season with one guy starting at the quarterback position. Malcolm, who never made it through a full game as a starter at quarterback until his last year. He made it through the entire season as a starter. So it does happen, but the usual situation is you need a couple of guys. I think if you had to handicap them right now, our line's the runner of the three. Probably a little bit more wiggle, while Lavatai is kind of the best of both worlds, a strong guy. And Maynard's a guy that I liked what I saw last year, but he was working mainly out of a shotgun in high school. That transition has been slowed. Same thing with our line as well. They made that transition, and I remember asking last year some of the coaching staff, like, is this really as big a deal as we make it out to be? And they were like, yeah, it is. It's something that we haven't been able to work on. They've certainly worked on it this year, but they didn't have the time last year. So I think it's a real close battle right now, and I think you'll see multiple guys play early in the season. Obviously, they'd like to settle on one guy and have him take over, but you might see a couple different guys play those first 2 games against Marshall and Air Force.
And of course, with the triple option, got the fullback, the slot back, and the B-back, and fullback Jamel Crothers, certainly a nice inside threat. What about the other positions in the backfield?
Well, Crothers, he was actually dismissed from the academy here recently, about a month ago.
Okay.
So he's not going to be. It's a huge loss for them. He was clearly their most experienced guy in the backfield. So Isaac Ruas, who's played a little bit a couple years ago, James Harris. And they have a young kid by the name of Malcolm Terry, not to be confused with Malcolm Perry, but Malcolm Terry is a young sophomore that they like a lot, that I think you'll see get some playing time. You can't make that up, Malcolm Perry to Malcolm Terry. So those 3 guys will try to fix, will fit in for Carruthers, who, had lost his starting job last year to Nelson Smith, who had a great year last year. They're thinking that they're going to be a little bit more bigger, more bruising from that fullback position. The slot backs, you look at the slot backs, Chance Warren, he's a senior, he's a captain, he's probably their most explosive playmaker from that position. So they're young there. It's really a unique situation when you talk about the guys that handle the football at Navy. This is not a situation that they're used to. Usually it's a lot of upperclassmen in those spots. Now, those guys have played, but if you look across the board of quarterbacks, fullbacks, and slot backs, really Chance Warren's only the only guy that has played throughout the last 3 years at Navy. Guys have gotten a chance here and there, but if you look at the overall number of touches, this is the fewest they've had from those combined positions in a long time at Navy.
Yeah, and essentially, it kind of brings to mind of a question, because, not a lot of high schools run triple option. I mean, I know Apopka High School down here in the Orlando area does, but those are few and far between. So they are often having to look at guys that are playing in spread offenses, making conversions. Yeah,
it's Jeff, it's funny. It's one of those things, like, I remember when I first started doing Navy games, 10, 15 years ago, we would always ask the opposing coach, like, who's been running it in practice. And now when you ask that, the opposing coach is like, we don't have any guys that ran any under the center option. I mean, it's completely like, it's rare to find a high school team when maybe 25 years ago, 15, 25 years ago, you probably had half the country in high school running some wishbone or some option offense. And now you'll talk to opposing coaches and say, well, I had a guy that his brother used to play quarterback in the option. We kind of taught him what to do, and we went over some of the things. So, yeah, and it really popped up last year when we talked a lot about the quarterback situation, because Xavier Arline and Masai Maynard both came from shotgun offenses that ran some option and threw the football a little bit. So there is a little bit of projection there. And, fullback is not they've moved a couple guys from maybe the running back position to that fullback too, but they are teaching a lot of this stuff from day one when they get to the academy, because not a lot of these kids have much experience at all at the high school level doing this.
Well, let's take a look at the defensive side of the ball. A big star on the defensive side, and the linebacker Diego Fagot in the middle. What a terrific player he is to watch.
He's fantastic. I mean, he is the heart and soul of this defense. He is one of the better. They've had some good inside linebackers over the last 10, 12 years at Navy, and he's up there. And I think the defense is going to be good. This was if you look at the overall numbers last year, you look at their numbers and you go, it's not that great. But if you look at what the back half of the season was for this Navy defense, it actually was really good. They played some tough teams down the stretch, but they played them well. And I think if you look at the last 3 or 4 games, this is a defense that has a lot of guys coming back. I think the one thing you look for is, can they get one of their defensive linemen to give them a consistent pass rush? If they can get that, I think you look at this team and you say this has a decent shot. They're a little young at corner, but they like what they had at corner. And obviously that's crucial in this conference to be good at corner. They've got some big guys they think can play. So I think there's a lot of optimism about this defense. And when I look over the numbers, when you look at the second half of the season, I was like, yeah, they actually played really well down the stretch. They just weren't helped by an offense that did much. But they like Donald Berniard at nose tackle. They think he's going to be really good. Fagot, as you mentioned, John Marshall, who's like a striker. He has, I hate to say star potential, but he has that ability to really create some havoc. He's a long guy that is quick, coming off the edge. McMorris at corner, they love him. They've got a lot of experience in the secondary. I think they think that the defense, if the offense is a little bit slow out of the gate, I think they think the defense can carry them for a couple weeks. And I tend to agree with them. I think it's going to be a really good defensive team this year.
And you also, looks like you have a lot more experience on that side of the ball too.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, the one, I guess, positive you could say about last year was a ton of guys played on defense. Now, it wasn't all good at all times, but they got a chance to see a lot of guys. One of the things that, we were talking about Jamel Carruthers. He kind of was the guy that kind of came out of nowhere a couple years ago. One of the things that Navy tries to do as much as possible, because they have a lot of guys on their roster. They bring a lot of guys, and sometimes guys can get lost on the depth chart. And one thing that they were allowed to do last year, because of injuries, because of COVID, because of guys having to sit every now and then, they played a lot of guys last year, and they got film on these guys actually in live football games. And I think they liked a lot of what they saw from some of the young guys. So I think when you look at the defensive side, it's clearly the more experienced of the two sides of the football. And a good portion of the guys on the two deep played, and started multiple games last year.
And of course, Coach Ken Niumatalolo, I'm sure as you mentioned, you spoke to him, and they won a flush last season. What do you think his optimism is going into this year?
I think that they're really excited about it. I mean, I think there's cautious optimism because of the schedule. I don't think there's any doubt this is the most difficult schedule we've played since we joined the AAC. When you talk about opening the season with Marshall, who was in the Conference USA championship game last year and is a physical football club, and then you play Air Force the next week, and then you have a span in the conference where it's at Houston, home against Central Florida, home against SMU, at Memphis, and home against Cincinnati. I don't know if we've ever played a 5-game stretch like that. And by the way, the next 2 weeks are at Tulsa and at Notre Dame. I think it's cautiously optimistic about where this team is right now, because the schedule is so difficult. But I get a sense that they think that a lot of people are doubting them, and that's the spot they like to be in.
Yeah, and the other thing that I find interesting about the schedule, Air Force Navy scheduled for 9/11, and I guess the rumors are that College Game Day may be considering Annapolis.
Yeah, I saw a couple people. I don't know if that's. I did see that rumor out there. They announced the uniforms today for the game, which is an offshoot of the Marine Corps uniforms. So they look fantastic. It's going to be a CBS national television 3:30 game. Yeah, I've seen those rumors. I can't confirm or deny those at this point. But it's a little bit different. We usually play Air Force the first Saturday in October. That's usually when the game is. So it's a little bit earlier than usual. But obviously, to commemorate 9/11, they set up this game with Air Force, and it makes for a difficult. In the last few years, Navy has started the schedule off with a Patriot League team. Outside, easily scheduled, 2019, they started with Holy Cross. 2016, they started off with a Patriot League team. They've had a little bit of a soft opening every couple years. But this year, it's obviously a tough matchup with Marshall, and then you get Air Force in week 2.
Yeah, no question about it. So, as you look towards this season, if you had to, bank on the crystal ball, what do you think the record is this year?
Well, I think 6 and 7 wins is not out of the realm of possibility. Vegas has them at like 3 wins. I think that's really low because I think the first 2 games are so huge for them. They get off to a good start. I think the one thing you look at Marshall and you look at the Air Force games is I wouldn't expect either of those teams to score a bunch of points against Navy in either of those games. I mean, typically the games here have been a little bit more crazy between Air Force and Navy, more high scoring than the games out in Colorado Springs. But I still wouldn't expect a shootout in any of those games. So it allows the offense to sort of get into rhythm. And I think they'll need that early on. If they can get out to a good start, if they can win those first 2 home games, then I think you set yourself up for, as the season progresses, you've got a chance to win 6 or 7 games. Look, not going to be easy. I'm really interested at, the game at Houston. Navy won the last time they were there. Houston came back here last year and won. But I think that's a matchup that I think if you get off to a good start, if you're 2-0 headed into that game before Central Florida and SMU come here, I think that's a game where you have a shot to go on the road, continue and build that momentum, and sort of, I guess the one positive, if you look at the schedule, is you get UCF and Cincinnati at home, so that's an opportunity to win some games at home. They've, outside of last year, they've actually been really good in conference and home games situations. They really haven't had any situations where it's sort of been a game where, they've gotten down by 2 or 3 scores and haven't been competitive. They've been competitive at home. So I think this team can win 6 or 7 games.
I tell you what, I have a, if UCF was not in the American, Navy would probably be my favorite conference team. So I've always had a little bit of affinity for the Naval Academy. To me, I think the conference is better when Navy's good too.
Oh yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Look, I think you look at last year and they've sort of made an assumption about this team where this team is sitting there going, you don't know what we're all about just yet. And I think, look, I've enjoyed, I worked for Navy for a couple years doing the broadcast before we joined the AAC, and joining the AAC, I think it's been fantastic for the team. I think it's been good for the conference. I love this conference. I love being a part of, even last year, even after you look at, they beat Temple, they beat East Carolina, even after they lost to Houston, we're still doing scenarios on how they get to the conference championship game over the last couple of weeks, where in years past, even at that point of the season, you're kind of sitting around wondering, okay, we've got Army, and that's it. So it's added some intrigue to this team. And I think it's good I think it's a good national recognition for the conference. Navy does very well. TV ratings, that you can't just, bypass that one. Obviously they bring a lot to the conference, and I think the conference, I think the conference is better for it.
And of course, one of the things I was thinking about too with the Navy and the American is, what are you looking at as far as, this potential realignment down the road? Any thoughts come to mind on that? I'm
interested to see what happens. It's look, I think there's obviously room for growth within the conference. They're exploring those. And it's, you sit out there and you try to think what works well for this conference. And I think Navy is in a good position. Obviously, it's all about, like, there's something I go back and forth with is, like, where does the conference see themselves going over the next couple of years? Where, if the playoff is 12 teams, if we get to that point, I think then you put your conference in a situation where right now, I think the conference champion would be part of a playoff like that. So I think a lot of people in Navy are excited about that opportunity. I know head coach Ken Niumatalolo has talked about that possibility and being excited about that. So I think if you can add a couple teams that help the profile, I think it's a good conference though anyway. I mean, I'm a big defender of this conference. I think some of the stuff people say about this conference is kind of ludicrous. And I mean, look, we've gotten to play over the years a lot of we played at Ohio State. We've played at Penn State. We obviously play Notre Dame every year except for last year. So we've seen and been at some of these other places. And I don't see a huge difference. I talked to the coaches and go, do you see a huge difference between, the talent level at UCF or Cincinnati and Notre Dame? And it's not like they go, oh my God, we can't, it's a different world. Nobody's saying that. I mean, obviously the top upper echelon, look, 4 or 5 teams have separated themselves from the rest of college football. If you look at the other teams, 6 through 20, there's not much of a difference in my opinion from 3 or 4 in this conference to a lot of those schools and those teams.
Well, Joe, before we let you run, please plug any other endeavors you're doing where you can be followed on social media and whatnot.
Yeah, JOMILMIL at Twitter. You can find me, and also do a podcast with my Navy radio partner Pete Medhurst called It's College Football, where we talk about all of college football, not just the AAC, but we do focus a lot on the AAC. But we talk about all the national games, and we do a preview show and a recap show each and every week. So check it out if you could.
Absolutely. It's a terrific podcast. It's in my rotation.
I appreciate that.
All right, Joe, as always, we appreciate it, and thank you for being on the show once again.
All right, thanks, Jeff.
And we will be right back to talk to Rich Phillips of SMU's radio network as we talk about the Mustangs for 2021 when the AAC report comes back after this.
If you haven't figured it out yet, I love Tijuana Flats. I would love them even if they weren't a partner with us on the Nightline Sports Network. They have all kinds of great Tex-Mex food, and it's fresh, by the way. Made to order burritos, tacos, enchiladas, chimichangas, quesadillas, bowls, nachos, and taco salads. And if you haven't tried the queso, you are completely missing out. It is the best queso that I've ever had in my life. Absolutely hands down. And the sauce bar that they have, everything from wild to mild in there. Absolutely awesome stuff. Not only do I love the food at Tijuana Flats, but I love the company, a UCF-born company. And they give back to the community with the Justin Queso Foundation. So head to your local Tijuana Flats. Tex-Mex for everyone. This is Andrew Fegley, host of Nightline at Night. I'm excited to tell you about our new time every Sunday, 5 to 6 p.m., right here on WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580. Go Knights and charge on.
All right, we continue our team-by-team previews. Up next, we look at the SMU Mustangs, and joining us now is the play-by-play voice of SMU, Rich Phillips joins us now. Rich, thanks so much for being back on the show.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me.
It is great to have you. And SMU, of course, like a few teams in conference, has to come up with a new quarterback for the 2021 season, as Shane Bichelle has moved on. And of course, he's an outstanding quarterback, so that's going to be a pretty tall order. Who do you think the man is for that job?
Well, I think it's really kind of a two-man race, although I think one guy does have the upper hand. They brought in, 2 4-star recruits. Tanner Mordecai, who's from Waco, a transfer from Oklahoma, where he lost out to Spencer Rattler for the starting job there last year. And then Preston Stone, who's a true freshman who enrolled back in the spring. He's from Parish Episcopal, a private school on the north side of Dallas. And Preston, one of the top quarterback recruits out of the state of Texas in the last recruiting cycle after winning back-to-back state championships at the private school level. So it's really kind of a two-horse race. I think Mordecai's probably going to have the upper hand. He did play a little bit at Oklahoma last year, and he's been in college for a couple years. And so the bottom line is if one of those two guys can play, I think their offense is going to be pretty good this year.
Yeah, it's an offense that averaged about 500 yards, 39 points a game last year, and they got a lot of returning players on the offensive side of the ball, so that's going to be of great comfort to whoever wins the quarterback job.
Definitely. Ulysses Bentley had a huge season as a redshirt freshman last year at running back, and he's one of probably 3, maybe even 4 options they're going to look at in the backfield. And then at wide receiver, they've got their best guy coming back from injury. Reggie Robertson was on his way to possibly setting tons of school records when he blew his knee out early October last year, and that's probably what prevented him from leaving school a year early and going on to the NFL draft. And so Robertson's going to be back and really a big play threat for the offensive receiver.
Yeah, and of course, in the receiving core, you just said the top 3 guys are back. They got some good enforcements there, so that certainly will play well for a team that likes to throw the football around.
Yeah, in addition to Reggie, who I mentioned there, Danny Gray coming back for his second year. He was a junior college transfer last year. And then Rasheed Rice, who had started middle of his freshman year, going to be a junior this year, has just continued to get better and better each year. So definitely their top 3 receivers look like they could be just about with anybody in the conference this year.
And how do things look in the trenches with the offensive line?
Tons of experience in that offensive line. They've got pretty much everybody coming back this year. That includes a guy who they got at the last minute last year. Justin Osborne was a guy from the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex who had gone to Auburn as a freshman, redshirted after playing very sparingly, and decided in August of last year to transfer back home. Actually couldn't play in week 1 last year because he hadn't cleared COVID protocol. He had arrived on campus so late. And then Osborne ended up as a redshirt freshman being the anchor at right guard all of last season, starting pretty much every game after that. Their left tackle is probably the best guy in the offensive line, Jalen Thomas. He's going to be a 4th-year starter for this team. And then veterans, too, at center with Alon Ali in there in the middle, and Hayden Howerton, their other guard. They've got a lot of veterans on the front line this year.
Switching over to the defensive side of the ball, the defense was decent last year, maybe not consistent, and a little bit of a struggle over the second half of the season. So Jim Levitt's been brought in to run the defense. Give me some thoughts on that. He certainly has a lot of skins on the wall as far as his credentials go, and one time the former head coach at South Florida.
Yeah, I really like that hire, by the way. You know, Sonny Dykes has done a terrific job, I think, of bringing in a lot of young, energetic coaches, coaches that are young and that are connecting really well with high school recruits as well as with guys who have been transferring from other D1 schools. But I thought Jim Levitt was a great hire because of that experience. He's gotten it done. Like you said, he pretty much started the South Florida program when he was there. Really good, solid defensive coach. He's going to have some new faces to work with, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because while they were okay defensively, they certainly had a lot of areas they need to shore up. They lost their top corner from last year, who's gone on to have a shot making it into the NFL, so they're going to have to find a new starter back there to go with Armani Johnson. They've got some guys that played at times last year, but still trying to find a few more of those pieces on the defense.
But at least he does have some returners on the defensive side coming back, so I guess that's good as opposed to having to kind of start from scratch, right?
Yeah, definitely. You know, the defensive tackle spot is where they've got a couple of their best guys, I think, from last year. Junior Aho, who was a transfer from the New Mexico Military Institute, and then Elijah Chapman really came on as a sophomore starter last year. And then another defensive tackle who transferred last year as a grad transfer from Stanford and originally opted out for the season because of COVID. And then about the end of October decided he was going to played a few games at the end of last year, but because everybody got the free year, he's getting to come back. And Mike Williams was a big-time player at Stanford on the defensive line at the tackle position. Should be a huge addition for them this year. And then at linebacker, really interested to see what Richard Moore is going to be like. This guy a couple of years ago was the best player on the defense and then blew his knee out 2 seasons ago in the TCU game in week 3 or 4 of the season, missed the rest of it. And then last year, he had a really hard time getting back, not only from the knee, but he had COVID in the offseason and didn't play until the very end of the season. He's opted to come back for another year. And like I said, a few years ago, Richard was the best player on this defense, so hopefully they can get that guy to return this year.
Yeah, and then you got Delano Robinson, Trevor Denbo. You got some good pop on in the linebacking core.
Yeah, definitely some veterans there, too. Delano Robinson's a guy who really has emerged. He's going to be a fourth-year starter here for this team this year, too, and a guy taking advantage of the extra year that players have been afforded because of the COVID pandemic last season. And,
let's talk a little bit about the head coach, Sonny Dykes. He is going to his 4th season, 7-3 overall last year, 4-3 in conference, and they have continued to, be near the top part of the conference. And I think one of the things that can be said, certainly the transfer portal has been very good to SMU. And secondly, he's put a lot of emphasis on recruiting the Dallas area hard, bringing back guys who may have left for other schools, coming back home to the Dallas area, really kind of working that brand there. And it seems to be paying off.
Yeah, that's been the real key for him, has been recruiting. And like you said, not only high school players, but guys that, I mentioned to you, the guard, Justin Osborne, who went to Auburn, decided he wanted to come home and transferred here. That's been what they've been able to do. He's gotten a few other guys this year that have transferred in. Grant Calcaterra, a tight end from Oklahoma, that's going to be probably their number one guy at tight end, and he uses the tight ends a lot. And then they got a transfer kicker that has come here, Blake Mazza, who is from Plano originally and was at Washington State the last couple of years. Well, he's a Luke Rosa Award candidate already, coming in here as a transfer this year. Sonny's done an amazing job with kind of connecting SMU back to the city of Dallas. They've done a billboard campaign all across the Metroplex, where in parts of the Metroplex where players are from, they put up a billboard featuring that player, and it's really helped connect them to the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And he's, this is my 21st season here, and he's done it unlike any other coach has done in the entire time that I've worked here, kind of connecting the school back to the city and back to the Metroplex.
And really, when you think about, when he was hired by SMU, that was kind of a critical point, I think. And he has managed to quickly stabilize things and get the program in an upward trajectory.
There were some people that I don't think were really excited when Sonny was hired. He wasn't, the next hot young name out there on the horizon, kind of like Chad Morris was, the previous coach here at SMU, when they hired him away from Clemson, where he was the next big thing as the offensive coordinator there. And some felt that Sonny was an older guy. And it's like, well, he's about the same age as Chad Morris. There's really not much difference there. But he has quickly made anybody forget if they were not 100% in favor of this, because of, again, the way he's just energized the community about the team and the way the team's performed. I mean, they've been in the top 25 the last couple of years, which is something that really hadn't been done in 30 years around here.
Yeah, I think UCF is hoping they get the same kind of play with Gus Malzahn, the guy that
Sure.
people weren't initially hot on right at the start, but all of a sudden it's like, okay, this is the right direction to go in. So 2021, as the season is about to embark, what do you think is the outlook for the Mustangs for this season?
Yeah, I kind of said it earlier. If one of those quarterbacks can play, which that's obviously a question, but so many schools are asking that same question. If one of those two, Tanner Mordecai or Preston Stone, can play, I think they're going to be really good, especially on offense. The thing they're going to have to do is finish the season the way they start the season, because each of the last 2 years they've kind of tripped up at the end of the year. A couple years ago, 2 seasons ago, they were off to an 8-0 start, had the big showdown that was on ABC primetime on a Saturday night at Memphis, lost that game, wound up after going 8-0. They wound up losing 3 of their last 5. Last year they started 7-1, lost their last 2, and then had 2 games that were canceled because of COVID. But they were showing signs again that they were leaking oil late in the season. So they've had great starts here the last 2 years. They need to have a great finish to this season to get themselves over the top.
And as you look at the conference, obviously Cincinnati is certainly the favorite coming off their terrific season, and they're getting some early season accolades and making the top 10 in the AP poll.
Yeah.
This conference, really does show a lot of strength, and it's not just the team at top that does that.
No, I look at the SMU schedule and I look at this stretch that they have that starts in mid-October, going to Navy. Then after they play Toledo at home, they go to Houston, they go to Memphis, they host UCF, and they go to Cincinnati. I mean, that's the teeth of the conference right there that they have all in a row. And by the way, then Tulsa at the end of the season right after that, a team that they lost to on the road last year. Definitely lots of roadblocks there. Cincinnati certainly is the number one roadblock, but Memphis, UCF, and Houston all right up there with them, I think, these days.
All right, well, Rich, it's always outstanding to talk to you. I certainly appreciate your time. Thanks again for giving us the preview on SMU.
All right, thanks for having me.
And that's going to do it for this week's show. As always, please follow me on Twitter at JeffAllen_88 and follow the Nightline Sports Network at UCF_Nightline. This has been the AAC Report only on the Nightline Sports Network. I'm Jeff Allen. Thanks for listening.